And the chicken turns to the pig and says, hey, we should open a restaurant, you know. The pig thinks about it for a moment and he says, well, what would we call this restaurant? The chicken thinks for another moment and he says, let's call it Ham and Eggs. The pig turns to the chicken and says, no, I don't think so, because I'd be committed and you'd only be involved. Today, as we continue our series on desperate marriages and God's responses to them, I want to talk to you today about commitment. What it is, what it isn't, what it looks like, and how we can become committed to the wrong things in our relationships. Now, the whole context of this sermon series is about marriages, but I want to make sure that everyone understands that this really pertains to any type of relationship, whether it be relationships with friends, family members, your children, your parents, people in the church, and most especially Christ. So I don't want you to think, oh, I'm not married, or whatever the case may be, and it doesn't pertain to me. Stay awake. I promise you it has something for everyone. So a picture of commitment today. A man walks into a photography studio and he wants to get a picture framed, and he has this picture of his girlfriend with him. And so he hands the picture to the attendant and says, I need to have this picture framed. This is my girlfriend. I love her dearly, and I really want to hang this on the wall. The attendant says, great. Goes to the back and begins to work on it, but he turns over the picture, and on the back he sees an inscription, and it says, my dearest Tom, I love you with all of my heart. I can't fathom a day where we're not together. I hope that we can spend eternity in love and together forever. And it's signed Sarah. But down below there's a P.S. And the P.S. reads, but by the way, if we ever break up, I want my picture back. And in a lot of ways, that's what commitment in relationships has become nowadays. Commitment used to mean forever. That's what marriage used to mean. But we've allowed a number of things to be interjected into our relationships, and most specifically our marriages, that actually speak contrary to this eternal commitment. Think about prenuptial agreements. I always laugh about prenuptial agreements because it's in so many ways saying, I love you, I want to marry you, but I'm already planning for the future without you. I mean, it's already signing the divorce papers before the marriage ever gets started. Or how about people that maintain separate checking accounts? I love you, I want to be married to you, but I love and want to be married to my money just a little bit more. And then we have people who live together for a very, very long time, forever really, and I'm not condemning living together, I'm not going down that road, but what I am saying is you have these people that say, oh, I don't need that piece of paper. Isn't what they're really saying is I don't need that commitment? I want to leave the back door open so in case I just want to walk out, then I'm free to do so. And then you have people who get married, and they're in the career world, and they're trying to make their way, and they maintain separate residences. He lives on the East Coast, she lives on the West Coast. How is that commitment to joining together in a relationship? How is that a commitment to how God intended it to be? In a lot of ways, it's become very, very peculiar what we consider commitment. I mean, after all, for the last several weeks, we've been talking about God's intention for marriage, and we've kind of drawn words out of the text, words like leave and cleave and becoming one flesh and forever. But doesn't it seem painfully obvious that that's really not the intent of marriage anymore? Now, I want you to read something. It's up on the screen, and I'm sure it's something that you're going to be very familiar with. It's a traditional wedding vows. Most of you, if you've got married in a Christian atmosphere, said something similar to this. And listen to the words, if you will. I, and you put your name in there, take thee, whoever your spouse is, to be my wedded wife / husband, to have, to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. Everybody say that for me, please. According to God's holy ordinance. And therefore I pledge myself to you. Listen to what the power of those words. for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. And most importantly, really, according to God's holy ordinance. Marriage is and it always has been a permanent commitment. God never intended it to be a temporary thing, a seasonal thing, here today and gone tomorrow. Most of us know that. But here's the part that you may not have known, and it really brings us to where we are today in church. Marriage is a direct reflection of Christ and His relationship to us and the church. Everything about marriage is a reflection of Jesus Christ. Everything about Jesus Christ should be reflected in our relationships and in our marriages. Paul does an amazing job of telling us just that. I want to read to you some verses from Ephesians, from the 5th chapter, verses 21 through 32. Listen how Paul correlates relationships back to Jesus Christ. Out of respect for Christ, be courteously reverent to one another. Oh, he starts right off in saying it's about Jesus. Wives, understand and support your husband in ways that show your support for Christ. The husband provides leadership to his wife the way Christ does to his church, not by domineering, but by cherishing. So just as the church submits to Christ as he exercises such leadership, wives should likewise submit to their husbands. Husbands, go all out in your love for your wives, exactly as Christ did for the church, a love marked by giving, not getting. Christ's love makes the church whole. His words evoke her beauty. Everything he does and says is designed to bring the best out of her, dressing her in dazzling white silk, radiant with holiness, and that is how husbands ought to love their wives. They're really doing themselves a favor since they're already one in marriage. No one abuses his own body, does he? No, he feeds and pampers it. That's how Christ treats us, the church, since we are part of his body. And that is why a man leaves his father and mother and cherishes his wife. No longer two, they become one flesh. This is a huge mystery, and I don't pretend to understand it all. Pause. What is clearest to me is the way Christ treats the church. And this provides a good picture of how each husband is to treat his wife, loving himself in loving her, and how each wife is to honor her husband. Listen to the power of those words when Paul correlates marriage to the relationship with Jesus Christ. And if we think about Jesus, we know that his love was unfailing, his love was sacrificial, and his love is eternal. But I'm afraid we've lost a lot of that commitment. Let's do something here. If you've been married 30 years or more, raise your hand. Everybody look around, please. I want us... If you've been married 40 years or more, raise your hand. If you've been married 50 years or more, raise your hand. Is there anybody up 60? Ah. 64 and a half. How amazing is that? That was what God intended marriage to be. Do you know how long the average length of what we consider a serious relationship is in 2015? We go from almost 65, 64 and a half years to 2 years and 9 months. 2 years and 9 months is the average length of what we consider a serious relationship in 2015. How can you figure it out in 2 years and 9 months? You can't. And here's something to write down. You cannot conquer what you are not committed to. If you are not committed to your relationship, to your marriage, you will never conquer it. Commitment is a cement that holds relationships together. And if you're not committed, they fall apart. Now we love in our modern day to have our heroes. All of us have heroes. These are proprietors of great achievement that we put up on a pedestal, and we applaud them that they've achieved such amazing things. We worship them. We buy their clothes. You know, we seek their autographs. But here's the part about all those people that you're forgetting, is in order to obtain that greatness, they had to fail along the way. Over and over again, the people that we want to be like have failed along the way, and the only thing that has allowed them to reach that pinnacle is their commitment. Why can't we have the same idea with our marriages? We have to be committed if we're going to reach that pinnacle of 64 and a half years. We talk about people that failed, and we talk about commitment. Who remembers that guy named John Elway? Anybody remember him? I have to admit that I was never much of a John Elway fan. I always thought that John Elway was, from what I saw, was the guy who would always point a finger. He was committed to himself being great, but I didn't really see that he was committed to making his team great. If a pass got dropped, he would be yelling. He was always yelling at somebody, you should have been there, you should have been in there. Doesn't matter that the ball went end over end or 10 yards over the receiver's hands. John Elway was all about really committed to himself. That was until Super Bowl 32. Melissa, do you remember Super Bowl 32? Yeah. Super Bowl 32, Denver Broncos against the Packers. Super Bowl 32, Denver Broncos against the Green Bay Packers. It's fourth quarter. There's just minutes left. It's a really tight game. The Broncos have the ball on their own 12-yard line. John Elway takes a snap from under center. He rolls to his right, because that's all John Elway ever did was roll to his right. He rolls to his right. He looks left. He looks right. There's no one there. John Elway makes a career decision. John Elway finally commits to the win. John Elway runs the ball. Now that in itself is an oxymoron because John Elway, knock-kneed, pigeon-toed, and bow-legged, could not run. But John Elway decided to run the ball that day. He runs up the right. In comes the defense. John Elway does not slide. John Elway puts his head down, and that's where we have that famous helicopter move. John Elway got smashed. He got thrown in the air. He flung around, landed on his back. He jumps up, he gets back to the huddle. Terrell Davis takes it in for a touchdown, the winning touchdown, the very next play. That's when I became a John Elway fan. Because finally, John Elway was committed to something more than himself. John Elway became committed to the team in my eyes that day. And now I consider him a great player. But it took a lot of years for him to figure out that he had to be committed to more than just a portion of the game before they could be successful. Our marriages require that kind of John Elway around the right type of commitment. It's third down and long. You got to run the ball. Now, having said all of that, though, I want you to realize something. You may be sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, but I am committed. And I believe that each and every one of you, depending on what type of a relationship you're in, is committed to at least a portion of your relationship. But here's what I want to draw out today, that relationships change. And what happens when relationships change is we can often become committed to a part of it, but not to the part we're in. And sometimes we never get past that part, and our marriages never have a chance to reach that pinnacle of perfection because we're still committed to something that was 10 years ago. And unless we change our mindset to commit to the relationship that we're in now, and that we're willing to allow that commitment to change as our relationship does, we can never be successful. Now, I talked about the track team earlier, and we gave them all a hand. I like to watch track and field on TV because those people do everything I never could do. But one of the events that I like to watch are the long distance races because I used to do a little of that many, many years ago. But anyways, in long distance races, when you have really good athletes, oftentimes they put in somebody called a rabbit. Now, a rabbit's job is to go out and set a pace that's fast enough that it can really be a good time when everybody's done. So the rabbit usually takes the lead and it really pushes the rest of the pack to run fast. But here's what I want you to know about that rabbit. That rabbit is only committed to about 2/3 of the race. That rabbit has no intention of finishing the race at the pace that it started at. So about 2/3 of the race, the rabbit usually runs off the track and it leaves the other people to finish the race. How does that pertain to our marriages? If we're only committed to 2/3 of our marriage, there is no way we can finish the race and be successful. Chances are that rabbit could not win the race, or he or she'd be running the whole race. They're good at that portion of it. We have to be better than just a portion of our marriage. We have to be willing to go the distance and be committed until, I don't want to say the bitter end, but at least to the end. We have to be committed to our relationship no matter where we are in the race, and we always have to be looking forward to finish strong. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that commitment and the way that marriages change. We're going to do that through Jacob's story that Rick read a little bit from. I'm going to kind of start before where Rick read in the scriptures and give you a little bit of background and build up to that. So if you're not familiar with Jacob, Jacob is the son of Isaac and Rebekah, and he has an older brother named Esau. And if you remember, there's a famous Bible story that we love to read about how Jacob cheated Esau out of his blessing, because the older brother was blessed and given blessings by the father, over a bowl of stew. So he cheats Esau out of his blessing, Jacob does, over a bowl of stew, and Esau is very, very angry about this. So as Isaac nears death, Rebekah, the mother, overhears Esau, the older brother, saying, you know what, he cheated me, and when our father passes away, I'm going to kill him. Well, Rebekah loved Jacob more than she loved Esau, so she goes to Jacob and she says, Jacob, you have got to get out of here. Your brother's planning on killing you as soon as your father passes along. So why don't you go over here to my brother Laban's house and find yourself a wife from your cousins? Because that's the way they rolled back there. You know, cousins were okay. So Rebekah tells Jacob to go over there and get himself a wife, get away from Esau, and maybe he'll calm down over a period of time. Jacob thinks that's a great idea. So he leaves. And he goes over towards Laban's house, and before he gets there, he comes to this big open field, and there's shepherds all around with all these sheep, and there's a well in the middle. And off in the distance, he spots this beautiful young lady. Her name is Raquel. He's got this beautiful young lady that he sees, and he's smitten. I mean, he's just infatuated. Guys, do you remember what that's like? Come on, be honest. Do you remember what it's like to see the woman, and you just know that that's the woman for you? I see pointing fingers already. That's probably bad. So Jacob sees Raquel, and it's just the most beautiful woman that he's ever seen. And he's like, this has got to be the woman for me. So he goes into beast mode. You know, he goes into his Mac Daddy mode. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to get me Raquel. So he runs over to the well, and there's this huge rock on this well, right? And normally later in the day, a number of shepherds get around and pick up this huge rock. Well, Jacob's going to show off for Raquel, so he hefts this rock and throws it off the well. He's, whoo, look how tough I am. So he shows off for her, but he's not done there yet, because then he runs out and he grabs her sheep and he brings them in to water them. He's going to show her that not only is he strong, but he can take charge. And so then he brings the sheep in, and then the text gets kind of weird. I know, guys, we're not this emotional and stuff like this, but it says then that he kisses her and then he cries. You know, he's trying to show her his compassion and his soft side, because we all have that, right, guys? So, I mean, he's laying it all out on the line for Raquel. So he shows her his soft side, and then he follows her back home to Laban's house, and he works for Laban for an entire month. And now, I'm taking a little bit out of the text, but somewhere in his mind, he's like, maybe if I can impress that dad, he'll allow me to marry his daughter. So he works for an entire month for nothing. This is really the first stage of relationships that we go through, and I call it the chase. And boy, oh boy, are we committed to the chase. Anybody remember the chase? Come on. Sweaty palms. Guys, you opened doors. Ladies, you ate with your mouth closed. Flowers and chocolates were around every corner, notes, and now it'd be a text every 20 minutes, the chase. We are so committed to the chase. And really, there's something deep inside of us that drives the chase. It's that unwillingness to fail. You know, I got to conquer this man, or I got to conquer this woman. And so we go all out for the chase, and we'll do anything for the chase. I mean, you'll stay up all night and listen to your woman talk. How many guys have been married 40, 30, 20, 10, 2 years, stay up all night and listen to your woman talk now? Yeah, look around, people. But during that chase, we're committed. We are fully and wholly committed to our relationship during that chase. The trouble is that the chase doesn't last forever. And neither did it last forever in Jacob's instance. So Jacob, he's at this point where he's going to ask Laban. And Laban says, hey, you've been working at me for a long time, for a month, and you haven't received any pay. And again, reading into the scripture, I think Laban knew what was up. And that's kind of what led this conversation to where it did. And Laban's like, how can I pay you for what you've done? And how can I pay you moving forward? And Jacob says, I'll work for 7 years if you allow me to have Rachel's hand in marriage. 7 years. And so he goes to work for 7 years. This is the second stage of marriage. The stage of marriage that requires work. For 7 long years, long years, Jacob toils for Rachel. And he toils so that they can get closer together. Now I want you to think, for those of people that have been married for a few years, about the first 7 years, how much work that requires. Would anybody agree with me that the first 7 years require a little bit of work? Because it's during those first 7 years where everything that was shiny and new wears off. Okay? There were no clothes on the floor, now there's clothes on the floor. There was no hair in the sinks, now there's hairs in the sinks. The toilet seat was always down, now it's up. You see, we get used to the person we're living with, and we start to really, in a lot of ways, see the real person. The chase is over. Now we have some work to do. But here's where it becomes an issue. Because if we're still enamored with the chase, and we haven't changed our commitment to be involved in the work, then suddenly we wake up next to someone, we look over at them, and we chew our arm off so we don't wake them up, because we don't have any idea who that person is. Have you ever heard people say that? You're not the person I married? If I had known this about you when we were dating, I never would have. That stuff happens during the work stage of marriage. And here's what I want you to know. Lots of heads doing this out there. Here's what I want you to know about the commitment. From the very beginning, you have to make sure that you're committed to the relationship and not the situation. You have to commit to the relationship, not the circumstances or the situation that you're in. Because I guarantee you that the circumstances and the situations are going to change. Everything about the chase is going to be different during the period of work. You have to go back and you have to get jobs. So while you stayed up all night talking, suddenly you have to get to bed because you have to work in the morning. All of that changes. And if you're committed to that high that you got during the chase, nobody wants to be involved in the working period. But Jacob shows that he is committed, and he works for 7 years, and then he gets kind of a monkey wrench thrown in everything. He's made it through the work years, or so he thinks. Laban has agreed, okay, it's time for the wedding ceremony. They get together, they have all their ceremonies. No, I wondered, how in the world could all this happen that's about to happen? But know that there's traditionally a very heavy veil over the face of the bride, so he wouldn't actually see her. It's not until they take him back to the wedding chamber that he would take the veil off, and they would, you know. So they go through the ceremony, they go to a dark room to the wedding chamber, and they do their thing on the wedding night. He wakes up the next morning, and lo and behold, it is not Raquel, but it's Leah. And so he runs out of the room, or at least I can see him running out of the room, and he finds her father and he says, "What is the deal? We agreed to 7 years of labor so that I could marry your daughter, Raquel." Well, Laban lies to him because there was no such policy, if you will, tradition. He says, "Well, I had to marry the older daughter before you can marry the younger daughter." That's just not the case. Now, I don't know what I would have done. How many of you guys out there that have been together with someone for 7 years would have taken on a second wife? Yeah. I don't think I would have taken on a second wife at the same time either, but Jacob is committed. Jacob is committed to Raquel, and he says, "Okay, I'll work for you for another 7 years, and then you'll allow me to marry Raquel." And after that, they go through a whole lot of trouble, because what happens is that Leah has babies and Raquel can't. Laban tries to cheat Jacob out of everything that he's acquired over the years. Laban's sons get angry at Jacob because they think he's getting special treatment. They end up having to move away, and there's a whole series of events that start with this 2nd year period of internment with Laban. And this really is the third period stage of marriage, and that's the maintenance stage. And let me tell you what you realize during the maintenance stage. You realize that this is always going to be difficult. I think in all of our minds that when we get married, we think that there's going to come a point in time in our relationship where it's just going to be smooth sailing, where you understand me and I understand you and we'll never have an issue. And it's just like, warm and fuzzy fairy tale stuff, right? Snow White. But during the maintenance stage, and this happens after years, we start thinking, I thought all of this was going to come to an end. This is kind of where the 7-year itch begins. Who's heard of the 7-year itch? Do you know where the 7-year itch was coined after? Kind of interesting fact. The 7-year itch was coined out of an untreatable skin disease. Make that correlation with marriage, would you? We've had this skin disease for 7 years and we think it's going to get better, but it just doesn't go away. And in so many ways, this third stage, this maintenance stage, is like, I thought once we got through that things were going to be better. Why does it take so much of my commitment to make this relationship work? I'm sure if we talked to those people that were at 40, 50, and 64 and a half years, they would tell us that it requires effort. Nothing ever gets easy when it comes to relationships. It requires your commitment every day, every year, for as long as you're married. And at the point that you give up, that's the point that your marriage is going to fail. Because during this maintenance years, you think your kids move out and they're gone? Sorry. You think your bills are paid? Something else comes up. These are the years when your health starts to fail, so you have a new set of circumstances to deal with. So we've kind of walked through marriage, really, and talked about the 3 stages. But above all, what I want you to see is that a committed relationship never ceases to require effort, and by both parties. It never gets easy. It will always require your complete commitment. But I want you also to know this, that the fact that you're struggling, the fact that you're having difficulty, the fact that you think that this is just full of trial and tribulations is not necessarily a barometer of the healthiness of your relationship. It might just be that you're committed to a time that's long gone and past. And maybe you need to refocus on where you are today. Maybe you need to remember what you were committed to during that chase. The beautiful person that you had back there. The person who would throw stones and kiss and cry and work for nothing. Because I guarantee you, that person is still in each of you. It just requires your partner to look for them. Stay committed. So as we conclude, I kind of want to refocus, as I started, on all kinds of relationships, because this pertains to all relationships we have. Being committed to relationships with family, with friends, with spouses, with girlfriends, with boyfriends, and most importantly, with Jesus Christ. Relationships, even with Jesus, are not easy at times. It requires effort. And nothing worth having ever comes easy. But if you give up on it, you'll never have whatever it is that's worth having. If you quit the race like the rabbit, you'll never reach the pinnacle of perfection. But I want to draw one more correlation, and that's with Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ showed us and continues to show us what it means to be committed. To the bitter end in his case, but to the glorious end that is to come. Since we were born, Christ has loved us. Christ has done things for us. He's forgiven us. And he will be with us forever. That's how our relationships are supposed to be. Eternal, committed to the circumstances that you're in, but most of all committed to each other. We're going to finish today as we have for the past few weeks. Cheryl, if you'd come up here, please. I ask you to join hands with someone that you